When I was very little in the early 2000s, I was very shy. It was hard for me to make friends with other kids or find ways to relate to them, but even sitting in those rooms crowded with other kids, not sure how I'd fit in with them, I'd guarantee every person in that room would have one thing in common. We'd know Star Wars. Maybe it doesn't make sense to people now, but Star Wars was a phenomenon like no one had ever seen. You were a rare exception if you hadn't seen Star Wars, or even worse, you didn't like Star Wars. Showing a little kid Star Wars was like teaching them how to swim or ride a bike. You'd have to know Star Wars. There isn't a time in my own life where I can remember having not seen Star Wars, the biggest franchise and fan base on the earth at the time. It was a sci-fi fantasy that was easy for people to legitimately adore. Its simple story about good overcoming evil, a young man looking for adventure and discovering himself as a hero, the friendships, the romances, the downfalls, the victories. Star Wars was the ultimate lore people could relate to. It was without a doubt the most influential cultural relic to come out of the 20th century. So, what happened? From 1999 to 2005, the Star Wars prequels were released. They were more negatively received than the original trilogy, with people criticizing the plot and Jar Jar Binks. However, these Star Wars films kept the tone and ideas of the original trilogy in spite of their flaws. A new generation of Star Wars fan was born, and that includes myself. 10 years later, after Disney's acquisition of Star Wars and George Lucas's retirement, the first movie of the Star Wars sequel trilogy arrived, The Force Awakens. The movie introduced us to some new characters, made some controversial decisions about who was killed off, and who would only appear in a cameo at the end of the movie. But it was overall the same movie as A New Hope told over again. The movie gained criticism for this, and like the Star Wars prequels, had people preaching on the reality that it wasn't actually a good film. However, it captured the feel and themes of Star Wars again. Fans were keen to see how it would continue. The criticisms were defended, saying that we merely weren't seeing the full story here. The next movie would surely improve. I remember myself being disappointed at some of the decisions made with The Force Awakens, but looking forward to the sequels. Millions of fan theories cropped up and excited speculation on where the story would go. A new generation of people seemed to be becoming fans of Star Wars again for the first time. The Star Wars brand went on strong. I remember sitting in the theater at the end of The Last Jedi. Usually when a movie is over, whoever I'm with will turn to me and ask me what I think.
So, what do you think of her, hon?
I remember these being my exact words. I've lived too long. Why did I say that? I was in denial at how bad the movie actually was at the time. The reasons why I said those words was because I had lived long enough to see what I thought would never happen. The death of Star Wars. I know people use that analogy a lot, and to some people it can sound like hyperbole, but what Death of Star Wars means is the end of the massive amount of people willing to buy into the illusion of Star Wars. The Last Jedi was a lot of things. It was a movie with plot holes compiling on plot holes, detours that wound up being pointless, decisions by characters that made no sense, universe-breaking physics, but it was even more than just a bad movie. The prequels and The Force Awakens weren't objectively fantastic movies either, but they didn't stop the widespread love for this franchise. The Last Jedi was the first movie that went against George Lucas's original tone and story for Star Wars. He just wanted it to be a simple story about good versus evil, an evil dictatorship taking over the galaxy and then being fought back by the good guys who resisted the temptations of the dark side. The Last Jedi took the hero that we saw overcoming evil from the original saga and turned him into a completely different character who's fearful and gives up on people. All the expansive lore that made people excited about exploring more and more of this universe was given dead ends and empty answers. And this. And this. And this. In Rian Johnson's attempt to subvert expectations, to turn Star Wars into something completely different than what we recognized it as, to scramble up an entire standalone movie by itself just for the sake of it, he ended up killing people's belief in this story. Every argument about Star Wars in the past had come from a place of passion, arguing which media was actually well made or not. Even with the disdain from certain groups towards the prequels, the love for the universe was still so clear. After The Last Jedi, the hate for what Star Wars had became louder than the defense. The sense of excitement for this world and how that love for this universe could connect people to each other was gone. The illusion of Star Wars had been killed. But as the biggest fan base the world had ever seen, many weren't going to let go that easily. So many people wanted to see it get better, myself included. A kind of advocacy was started to see if Star Wars could ever get back on track and provide the wondrous and connective experience that it used to. A new show on Disney Plus seemed to bring some interest back to Star Wars, The Mandalorian. Finally, something Star Wars was being talked about positively in the mainstream again. Merchandise from the show is everywhere. Would Star Wars be resurrected anew through TV now? There was just one problem. The Mandalorian was never good. I noticed something when I first tried to get into The Mandalorian. Nothing happened. In any episode. It's a show that pads out its incredibly thin plot with barely any dialogue, an incredibly slow pace, and mostly filler episodes. Why was everyone on board with this? Was it just because of Baby Yoda? Baby Yoda everywhere? That little green goblin everywhere? Baby Yoda this, Baby Yoda that? I think people enjoy getting a show that was just a big nothing. I mean, if nothing is happening in a Star Wars show, that means nothing can tarnish it, right? There was a lot of love for Star Wars still, despite the damage that had been done. I think a lot of people projected that love onto The Mandalorian because there was nothing it really seemed to do to damage what Star Wars was meant to be. But like most shows that maybe have some initial popularity but don't have the quality to back it up, The Mandalorian would not stand the test of time. Sure enough, it eventually seems people turned on it too. After only 3 seasons and a terrible Boba Fett spinoff. Disney came out with other Star Wars shows. Andor, said to supposedly be better than The Mandalorian, but no one cared to watch. These properties were far and away from the characters and story we once loved. Was people's love for Star Wars finally devolving into apathy? I had a feeling before Obi-Wan was coming out, and I don't know why, but I just knew. If Obi-Wan isn't good, then I don't care about Star Wars anymore. Somehow I just knew, and then it came out. I see Obi-Wan, another depressed old man who's given up on everything. Never mind that doesn't add up with his demeanor in either sequel or prequel. He left for Tatooine with hope and a mission for the future, and now we're supposed to believe he gave up on that. It's like the writers can't imagine any other outcome for someone who's gone through tragedy. I'm watching this show. I see Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting when they weren't even supposed to meet at this point. I see Obi-Wan meeting Leia when that was never supposed to even happen. I see a 7-year-old running away from grown men who forgot how to move. It's a badly made show even on its own. Would anyone care to watch this if it didn't have Star Wars on the title? I see a new character called Reva come out with the rumor that the show would actually be about her redemption arc in large part, not Obi-Wan. I see people revolt against this. I see people screaming at how much they hate the character. I see people screaming that anyone who hates the character is racist. I see people screaming back that they are not racist for hating the character. Then I see some people slip in who are actually racist towards the new character. I sit and wonder, how did the discussion around Star Wars devolve into accusations and fears on who is racist or not, with some actual racists slipping themselves in there? Where's the Star Wars I knew that used to bring people together? Now they're just screaming at each other. That's where the discussion of the show is. No fan base is perfect. There's always going to be some bad apples, but contrary to popular belief, the Star Wars fan base in general was not toxic.
We're just fanatics out here waiting on Return of the Jedi. 3 years in the making. We're waiting for this.
Some people don't idolize Darth Vader like I do. See, I want him to get Luke.
And I think that Luke will destroy Darth Vader.
I guess Darth Vader will die. I'm not sure. I hope he doesn't. I love his black.
There was some at the sides and corners of it, but the core Star Wars fans were people who just loved the escape these characters and universe provided. That escape was gone now. Just as I had felt that Obi-Wan would be the last straw for Star Wars going forward for me, it was. So I saw the recent news that Disney plans to make a Rey Skywalker movie. I reacted to it. I have a very hard time believing any of these Star Wars movies they've announced will ever get made. That's mainly because none of the Star Wars movies that they've announced for the past 6 years have come to light. But even if they do get made, I can't say I care. What Star Wars has been turned into isn't the universe I loved in the first place. The characters aren't the characters I loved in the first place. Even the man who created this world acknowledges they have nothing to do with what he intended.
I don't know. I mean, I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But the first 6 are very much mine and my philosophy. And I think that philosophy sort of goes beyond any particular time, because it's based on history, it's based on philosophy, it's based on a lot of things. And the first three basically tell you how a democracy turns into a dictatorship, and you end up with a tyrant, the emperor. But it really shows you, in terms of the way the politics are and the way things are, how to fight those ideas. And a lot of it really has to do with overcoming fear.
So I don't care to watch The Mandalorian or Ahsoka or the Rey Skywalker movie or whatever it may be. I don't care about Star Wars anymore. That is, I don't care about the new stuff. I found myself going back to the original saga. I find myself appreciating it more in hindsight. I've watched these movies several times recently in lieu of giving up on new Star Wars. I still love this universe. I still love the story. I still love the characters George Lucas created in the way that they're supposed to be. I'll always love actual Star Wars. My only fear is that the more new material is churned out, the more people will begin to accept this as Star Wars. The prequels gave Star Wars life to a new generation. Now I'm seeing everyone become less and less interested in Star Wars at all with this kind of representation for the franchise. However, with people showing the originals to their kids and the various theater screenings for the movies that still go on successfully, maybe there still is hope for Star Wars, as it's supposed to be. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. If you really want to give me a boost, please leave a like and a comment. It really helps in the algorithm. If you want to support all of my work, and I've got some great videos coming out, then you can also support me on Patreon. It costs only $5 to sign up at the lowest tier. And speaking of great videos I've got coming up in the future, my new horror short film, The Purple Hand, is releasing shortly on this channel, so subscribe for that. See, I don't just complain about movies on here, I also make my own stuff. And as a final shout out, I'd like to draw your attention to a new graphic novel Kickstarter that's coming out. It is by Frank Zacca, and it is called Destiny Aurora. It is an audiobook, novel series, and graphic novel. He is getting a Kickstarter going on this Destiny Horizons project, and it's up right now this May. Independent creators really need your help, so I'm leaving his link in the description, and you can check that out and see if you're interested. That's all I got for you guys today, and I will see you guys next time.